was. And like every quiet night, I have a story to share. You may subscribe for the night ahead. Close your eyes and let the story begin. Snow fell heavy on Warsaw. The winter Maria Sklodowska was born. It was 1867, and the city lay under the rule of the Russian Empire. In a modest apartment on Freda Street, a teacher and his wife welcomed their fifth child, a girl they named Maria. The Sklodowski household was rich in books, but poor in coin. Maria's father taught physics and mathematics. He filled cupboards with instruments, scales, magnet, glass vessels, small treasures he used to explain the hidden laws of the world. Her mother directed a boarding school for girls, a woman of strong faith and strict principle. Maria grew up in an atmosphere of discipline and learning, but also loss. When she was only 10, her mother died of tuberculosis. Before that, typhus had claimed her elder sister. Grief settled into the family like a long winter. Maria, the youngest, grew quiet, her bright eyes shadowed by sorrow. Yet even then, she clung to study. It was her way forward. Schoolwork came easily. Teachers marveled at her memory, her command of mathematics, her hunger for knowledge. But in Poland, universities were closed to women. The doors of higher learning were barred. For most girls, that was the end of the road. For Maria, it was only a pause. She sought education in secret. In Warsaw, the Flying University offered clandestine lectures for women, hidden from the eyes of Russian authorities. Maria attended whenever she could, slipping through streets with books under her coat, sitting in small rooms lit by lamps while professors spoke of science and philosophy. It was forbidden, but to Maria it felt like air, necessary, impossible to live without. By her late teens, she faced the practical reality of poverty. To support her family, she worked as a governess, tutoring children of wealthier households. She lived far from Warsaw, sending her wages home, saving coins for the dream she shared with her sister, Bronia. Together they had made a pact. Maria would help Bronia study medicine in Paris, and when Bronia succeeded, she would help Maria follow. Life as a governess was lonely. Maria walked in fields after lessons, her mind full of equations and stories of great scientists. She longed for laboratories and lectures, but instead she taught the basics to children. Still, she read constantly. By candlelight, she copied notes, studied physics texts, committed passages to memory. She was building her mind brick by brick, even in solitude. The years passed slowly, but the plan endured. Bronia completed her studies in Paris, became a doctor, and called Maria to join her. In 1891, at 24, Maria packed her belongings into a small trunk and boarded a train. She left behind Warsaw's familiar street, the graves of her mother and sister, the memory of winters heavy with grief. Ahead lay Paris, the Sorbonne, and the chance at the education she had always dreamed of. As the train rattled westward, Maria looked through the window at passing villages and rivers. She carried little in her hands, but everything in her heart. Grief, resilience, and the determination that knowledge would be her path. The silent girl from Warsaw was on her way to becoming Marie Curie. The train carried Maria west, out of Poland, across the plains of Europe, and into France. She arrived in Paris in 1891, 24 years old, carrying little more than determination and a hunger for knowledge. The city overwhelmed her at first. The crowded boulevards, the horse-drawn carriages rattling over cobbles, the gas lamps casting golden light into the winter fog. Paris was alive with music, debate, invention. For Maria, it was a promise of freedom. She enrolled at the Sorbonne, one of Europe's great universities, and registered as Maria Sklodowska. Soon, however, she adopted the French form of her name, Marie. She sat in lecture halls surrounded mostly by men, notebooks open, her face pale and serious under the dim light. She was not intimidated. She had fought too hard to be there. Her life was austere. She rented a small attic room near the university. The walls were thin, the bed narrow, the stove often cold for lack of fuel. She lived on bread, butter, and tea, sometimes fainting from hunger, but refusing to complain. Winter crept through the cracks. Frost gathered on her blanket, but she wrapped herself in study. Books covered her table, equations filled her pages, and she read late into the night by lamplight. Despite the hardship, she thrived. Mathematics and physics were her languages, and she absorbed them with ease. Professors noticed her brilliance. She earned degrees in both subjects, often ranking at the top of her class. She found in Paris not only knowledge, but independence, a life shaped by her own choices, free from the limitations she had known in Warsaw. She lived simply but joyfully in her mind. The laboratories of the Sorbonne became her second home. Glass beakers, coils of wire, the smell of metal and heat. They were tools of discovery, companions in her pursuit of truth. She devoted herself entirely to science, walking past the cafes and theaters of Paris without regret. In this world of study, she met another scientist, Marie Curie. He was quiet, thoughtful, devoted to research. His interests were in magnetism and crystals, and like Marie, he valued patience and precision. Their first conversations were professional, cautious, but slowly they discovered a shared rhythm, a love, not only for science, but for simplicity, for walking through the city together, for speaking softly of ideas. Pierre saw in Marie a mind equal to his own. Marie saw in Pierre a partner, rare and true. Their bond grew quickly. They married in 1895, a modest ceremony without grandeur, and together began a partnership that would change science forever. Pierre Curie was not the kind of man who sought attention. He lived quietly, devoted to his research. His thought often turned inward. Born in 1859, he was nearly 8 years older than Marie, and by the time they met, he was already known for important work in physics. He and his brother, Jack, had discovered piezoelectricity, showing that crystals under pressure could generate electricity. He had also studied magnetism with unusual insight. But Pierre's heart belonged not to honors or applause. It belonged to quiet work and steady truth. When friends introduced him to Marie in 1894, he found in her a kinder spirit. She was small in stature, reserved in speech, but her mind shone. She carried herself with seriousness, yet her words were precise, her focus steady. Pierre admired this immediately for Marie. For Marie, Pierre was unlike anyone she had known. Gentle, curious, filled with humility, yet brilliant. Their first conversations were about science, about the mysteries of rays and forces invisible to the eye. But underneath, something more was forming. Pierre visited her often. They walked through Paris Street, not speaking of frivolities, but of experiment, of possibilities. He told her of his dream, to devote his life fully to research, without distraction. She told him of her longing for a laboratory of her own, space where she could push the boundaries of knowledge. Their dreams matched, like two pieces of the same design. When Pierre proposed marriage, Marie hesitated at first. She still carried her Polish identity strongly, and she had once imagined returning home to teach, to share knowledge in her occupied country. But Pierre assured her that they could build a life together in France, and that their work, joined, would be greater than either could achieve alone. Slowly, she realized that this was not only a marriage, but a partnership of destiny. They married in 1895. It was a modest ceremony, simple and without extravagance. There were no jewels, no fine combs. Marie wore a dark blue dress, one she would later use in the laboratory. Friends remarked that it seemed fitting, her marriage attire becoming her work attire. She and Pierre asked for no gift except scientific instrument. Together, they set up a laboratory in Paris. It was hardly glamorous. A converted shed at the School of Physics and Chemistry, with a leaky roof, uneven floors, and draft that made winters bitter. Rain sometimes seeped in, sunlight rarely did. Yet for Marie and Pierre, it was a place of joy. Here they worked side by side, bent over experiment late into the night, sharing discoveries, frustrations, and laughter. Their lives outside the laboratory were quiet. They cycled together through the countryside, took simple holidays, lived modestly. Fame and wealth meant nothing to them. What mattered was work and each other. In that shed, in those long hours, their journey toward greatness began. Soon they would uncover forces that lay hidden in stone, forces that glowed faintly in darkness, forces that would change science and medicine forever. The year was 1896, when news reached Paris of a peculiar discovery. Henri Becquerel, a French physicist, had found that uranium salt emitted rays that could form photographic plates, even when kept in darkness. It was a mystery, a silent force, unseen, constant. Marie, already searching for a subject for a doctoral thesis, felt drawn to this phenomenon. Something invisible, something unexplained, something persistent even without sunlight. It called to her curiosity. She proposed to Pierre that she would investigate further. He encouraged her, offering not only advice, but his partnership. And so, in the dim, cold shed that served as their laboratory, Marie began her work. She tested minerals one by one. She measured their rays without painstaking patience, using an instrument Pierre had designed, an electrometer so sensitive it could detect the faintest charges. With it, Marie discovered that uranium was not alone. Thorium, too, gave off rays. The effect seemed to come from the atom itself, not from chemical arrangement. This was something new, something fundamental. She gave it a name: radioactivity. But her work did not stop there. Among the ores she studied was pitch blende, a dark, heavy mineral mined in Bohemia. It glowed with far more activity than could be explained by the uranium it contained. Marie reasoned there must be something else hidden within it, another element unknown to science, radiating power. So she and Pierre began the long, grueling process of extracting it. They ordered tons of pitch blende, dumped it in heaps outside their shed. Inside, they crushed it, dissolved it, boiled it, precipitated it, stirred it in great iron cauldrons. The air filled with acrid fumes. The floor grew slick with residue. Their hands grew raw from acids. Winter's cold froze. Their breath, summer's heat, made the shed stifling. Still, they labored, day after day, month after month, year upon year. Marie once described it One of us would stir the boiling mass with an iron rod, nearly as big as ourselves, for hours at a time. Their clothes were burned with holes. Their skin blistered. But their spirit held steady. They believed something extraordinary lay hidden in the black rock. Their patience was rewarded. In July 1898, they announced the discovery of a new element, which they named polonium. After Poland, Marie's homeland still under occupation, it was her quiet act of patriotism, a tribute to the country she had left but never forgotten. Later that year, they uncovered another radium, more powerful than polonium. It glowed with a pale blue light in the dark. Its energy seemed endless, mysterious, dangerous, and beautiful. Science had never seen anything like it. The world began to take notice. The Curies had uncovered forces hidden deep in matter itself. Forces that challenged old ideas of physics and opened new fields. Yet, for Marie and Pierre, it wasn't fame they sought, it was truth. They worked without thought of wealth, even refusing to patent the process of isolating radium. Knowledge, they believed, belonged to all. At night, when they left the shed, they carried with them glass vials of radium, salt. They glowed faintly in the darkness, like captured starlight, small beacons in their tired hands. Marie wrote later, it was like a new light, born from matter itself. The shed was poor, their lives modest, but their discoveries were vast. From those long years of labor came a new science, a new way of seeing the atom, a new future for medicine and physics alike. And at the heart of it all was Marie, quiet, resolute, her face pale but her eyes bright, a woman who had named a force and given it to the world. By 1903, the world would no longer ignore the discoveries that had emerged from a draughty shed in Paris. Marie and Pierre Curie, along with Henri Becquerel, were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for their work on radiation. For Marie, it was an astonishing moment. She became the first woman to win a Nobel Prize. Yet even as she received the honor, the recognition was not complete. Some within the committee had hesitated to include her, as though her work was secondary to Pierre's. But Pierre himself insisted her name be added. He knew it was her persistence, her insight, her steady patience that had led them to radium and polonium. Without her, the discoveries would not exist. The prize brought them fame, but not wealth. They still lived modestly, still worked long days in their makeshift lab, still wore patched clothes and mended shoes. They poured their prize money back into research. Knowledge, they believed, was treasure enough. But the glow of triumph was shadowed by tragedy. In April 1906, Pierre was crossing a Paris street on a rainy afternoon. A horse-drawn carriage struck him. His skull was fractured. He died instantly. When word reached Marie, her world collapsed. Pierre was not only her husband, but her partner in all things. They had worked side by side for more than a decade, shared discoveries, shared dreams. Now she was left with two young daughters, Irene and Eve, and a grief so heavy it threatened to silence her. Yet even in sorrow, she found strength in the work they had begun together. Few weeks later, she returned to the Sorbonne, standing before students. She gave her first lecture, the first woman ever to teach there. Her voice was quiet but steady, her face pale with mourning. She spoke not of loss, but of physics, of radiation, of forces unseen. The students sat in awe, not only of the science, but of the woman who carried it forward. She took Pierre's position at the university, continuing the work they had shared. She threw herself into research, her grief channeled into determination. In time, she would win a second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for her continued work on radium and polonium. She became the first person ever, man or woman, to win 2 Nobel Prizes in 2 sciences. But in 1906, all of that lay ahead. For now, she was a widow, standing in the cold shed that still smelled of chemicals and stone, looking at the notebooks she and Pierre had filled together. The glow of radium salt shone faintly in the dark, like stars seen through tears. And Marie, though broken in heart, resolved to carry on. After Pierre's death, many expected Marie Curie to step back, to retreat into widowhood and silence. Instead, she carried his chair at the Sorbonne, the first woman ever to lecture there. When she entered the hall in 1906, the room filled with students, many curious to see her. She wore black still, her grief plain. But when she began to speak, it was not of sorrow, it was of science. Her voice, soft but clear, carried across the hall. When radium was discovered, no one knew that it would prove useful in hospitals. She went on, outlining the principles she and Pierre had discovered. It was as if Pierre's work spoke through her, continued in her. Her life became a balance of mother and scientist. She raised Irene and Eve while spending long hours in the laboratory. Friends described her as austere, almost severe at times, but beneath that reserve was quite warm. She was determined to live not as a figure of pity, but as a scientist in her own right. In 1911, she was awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for her continued work isolating radium and polonium. She became the first person ever to win 2 Nobel Prizes, an achievement unmatched in her day. The world hailed her brilliance, yet it also scrutinized her more harshly than any man. Around this time, newspapers uncovered her friendship with physicist Paul Langevin, a married man estranged from his wife. Rumors turned to scandal. Headlines painted Marie not as scientist, but as seductress, as if her personal life could tarnish her discoveries. Crowds even gathered outside her home in Paris, shouting insult. It was cruel, and it wounded her deeply, but she refused to let it derail her. That same year, she attended the first Solvay conference. sitting at the table with the greatest minds of the age: Albert Einstein, Max Planck, Hendrik Lorentz. A rare photograph shows her there, the only woman among rows of suited men. She sat straight and smiling and yielding. Einstein himself would later write to her, "If the rabble continues to occupy itself with you, simply don't read that hogwash. Leave it to the reptiles." His letter comforted her, reminding her that those who mattered saw her for what she truly was: a pioneer, a scientist, a seeker of truth. Through it all, she remained devoted to radium. She believed in its power, not only for science, but for medicine. Doctors began to use it to treat cancer, its rays shrinking tumors, offering hope where little had existed. Marie supported this, even as the element she worked with was burning her hands, weakening her body slowly. She carried glass vials of radium in her pocket, kept them glowing by her bed at night, unaware of the danger. Alone, but never defeated, Marie Curie moved forward. She had endured loss, scandal, illness, and still her eyes remained fixed on discovery. The woman once barred from universities in Warsaw now stood among the greatest scientists in history, her name carved into the foundation of modern physics and chemistry. When the war broke out in 1914, the quiet order of Marie Curie's life was torn apart. German troops marched across Belgium and into France. Paris, the city of her discoveries, trembled under the shadow of conflict. Laboratories emptied, universities shuttered, families fled. For Marie, science was no longer only a matter of discovery, it became a matter of survival. She knew radium could not remain in Paris, vulnerable to capture. With her daughter, Irene, at her side, she packed a lead-lined box containing a single gram of the precious substance, a treasure wrestled from years of labor in pitch black. She placed it on a train bound for Bordeaux, guarding it with her life. Radium, she believed, was too valuable for the world to lose. But she also understood another need. Wounded soldiers filled hospitals, their injuries often hidden within the body, difficult to treat. Surgeons groped blindly, without knowing where a bullet or shrapnel lay. Marie saw how X-rays, still new in medicine, could save lives on the battlefield, and so she set to work. She designed small, mobile X-ray unit, wagons fitted with machines, batteries and screens. They could be driven directly to the front. With her knowledge of physics and her will to serve, she brought these units into existence. They were soon known as Petite Curies, Little Curies. But she did not stop at invention. She trained others, especially women, to operate the machines. She taught them how to position a wounded man, how to capture the shadow of the metal lodged inside him, how to guide a surgeon hand with precision. Her daughter Irene, only 17, worked by her side, learning not only science, but service. Marie herself drove into battle zones, her hair pinned back, her face set with determination. Soldiers who saw her often did not know she was already twice a Nobel laureate. To them, she was a woman who brought light into darkness, who bent over their stretchers, calm and steady, while machines hummed. By the war's end, she had helped establish more than 200 radiological units across France. Tens of thousands of wounded men owed their lives or their limbs to her vision. The little Curies became a quiet revolution. Science turned into mercy. Marie never spoke of it with grandeur. She simply said she had done what needed to be done. For her, service was the natural companion of knowledge. Science was not only for books and conferences. It was for people, for healing, for the living. When peace returned, she returned to her research, but the memory of those years lingered. The mad, the wounded, the glow of screens in makeshift tent, the quiet strength of her daughter at her side. The war had taken much from the world, but it had also revealed something profound, that even in destruction, knowledge could be turned into hope. When the war was over, Marie Curie returned to her laboratories. She had seen the destruction of battlefields, yet she believed more than ever that science could serve humanity. She founded the Radium Institute in Paris and later another in Warsaw, giving both France and her homeland a place devoted to discovery. Students came from across the world to work under her guidance. Many were women inspired by her example, finding in her proof that knowledge belonged to all. Her daughter Irene became a scientist in her own right, carrying her mother's torch of discovery. But the years of close contact with radium had taken their toll. Marie often carried glowing vials in her pocket, handled substances without protection, unaware of their danger. Slowly, her body weakened. She grew frail. Her eyesight dimmed. Her energy faded. In July of 1934, at the age of 66, she died of illness caused by prolonged radiation exposure. She passed quietly in France, leaving behind not wealth or monument, but something greater. Knowledge, courage, and an enduring light. Later she and Pierre were reinterred in the Pantheon in Paris. She became the first woman honored there for her own achievement. Even in death, her bones carried traces of the radium she had discovered, a reminder of the price she had paid. Her legacy shines still in hospitals where radiation heals, in universities where women study freely, in every mention of radioactivity, in every life saved by science. Her name endures. Marie Curie's life was marked by hardship, grief, and struggle, yet she rose above all of it. She lit the world with discoveries drawn from stone, and she proved that patience, humility, and determination can change the course of history. The silent girl from Warsaw became the voice of modern science. Vidal in Black became the first professor at the Sorbonne. the mother with 2 daughters, became the first person to wield 2 Nobel Prizes. Her story remains a light, steady, quiet, and inextinguishable. This was Hypnos. Another story has been told. And now, it's time to rest. Good night.